Titled in, feed her, let her starve, my daughter-in-law ordered. Then the doorbell rang. Roadmap 72 years old. That was my age when I decided to pay a surprise visit to my son James and daughter-in-law Patricia. I was excited. I'd baked my grandson's favorite chocolate chip cookies and bought my granddaughter a beautiful new dress. When I arrived at their house that Sunday afternoon, parked my aging car in the driveway and adjusted my graying hair in the rearview mirror. It had been almost 3 months since I'd seen my grandchildren. 3 months of unanswered phone calls and texts answered with short sentences. I never imagined the house I'd helped buy would become the scene of my worst nightmare. As I walked through the well-kept garden I'd financed 2 summers ago, I noticed a new barbecue grill had been installed. Interestingly, there was never a shortage of money for new purchases. But whenever I asked about paying off the $45,000 down payment, James would say things were tight. I knocked on the door with my wrinkled hands, which held the gift bags. I heard laughter coming from inside, the sound of silverware, and animated conversation. A family gathering, and I hadn't been invited. I took a deep breath, trying to push back the pang of pain I felt. It must just be an impromptu lunch, I thought to myself. The door opened, and I saw Patricia's surprised face. Her green eyes, always calculating, widened for a second before her artificial smile appeared. "Eleanor, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you today." Her tone made it clear my presence was unwelcome. Behind her, I could see the dining table laden with food, my son, James, my 2 grandchildren, and Patricia's parents, all seated comfortably. Grandma, my 7-year-old grandson Tommy, shouted, running toward me before being subtly restrained by Patricia. "We're in the middle of lunch, honey." She smiled at me without showing her teeth. "If you had called sooner, Eleanor, ... The pain of exclusion hit me like a punch. They were having a family Sunday lunch. Everyone was invited except me. Sorry to intrude. I just wanted to bring some little gifts for the kids." My voice was weaker than I'd liked. James finally noticed me and waved from the table without getting up. "Hi, Mom. What a surprise." No invitation to come in. No offer to join them. Patricia took the bags from my hands. "Thanks, I'll give them to them later." Then, as if I were a delivery person, not their grandmother, I tried to look past her to see my grandchildren, but Patricia strategically blocked my view. Her father, Robert, a man I'd known for less than 10 years, was sitting in the seat that had always been mine on family occasions. "Eleanor's leaving, isn't she?" Patricia said, more as a statement than a question. 23 years ago, when I first held James in my arms, I never imagined I would one day be treated like an unwanted stranger in his life. After my husband Harold passed away 8 years ago, James was all I had left. And now, standing on that doorstep, I realized how distant he had become. "Actually, I haven't had lunch yet. Can I join you?" The words came out before I could stop them. A small act of rebellion against the treatment I was receiving. The silence that followed was painful. Patricia glanced at James, who suddenly seemed very interested in his plate. "We didn't prepare enough food, Eleanor," she replied coolly. "Maybe next time, with advance notice." That's when I heard the voice of Patricia's mother, Martha, coming from the table. "Why don't you give her some money to buy something on the way back?" As if I were a beggar. As if I hadn't given them more money than I could count in the past few years. I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Tommy, my grandson, looked confused. "But there's plenty of food, Mommy. Why can't Grandma eat with us?" Bless that boy for his innocence. It was at that moment that I saw Patricia's true face. Her eyes narrowed at her son before returning to me. "Don't feed her, let the old woman starve," she said in a tone that tried to sound playful but carried unmistakable venom. Everyone at the table laughed, except Tommy and my 5-year-old granddaughter, Emma, who looked confused. Even James laughed, a weak laugh, but still a betrayal that cut to my heart. Her words hit me like a slap. "Old woman, starve." As if I were an unwanted stray animal. I stood there trembling, humiliated, and hungry. Not for food, but for dignity, for respect, for the love of my own son. 72 years of life, and I'd never felt so small. I was about to turn and leave, swallowing my pride along with my tears, when the doorbell rang. Patricia looked irritated by the interruption. "Who could it be now?" she complained, as if another surprise visit were too much to bear. She opened the door, and to my surprise, it was Roger Thompson, my lawyer. He seemed equally surprised to see me there. Mrs. Williams, what a coincidence. I've been trying to contact you. I stopped by your house, and when I couldn't find you, I thought I'd try here. Roger was a man in his 50s, always formal, in his impeccable suit. He had handled our family's legal affairs since Harold was alive. Patricia seemed momentarily disconcerted by the presence of a witness to her behavior. We're in the middle of a family lunch, she said, emphasizing the word family in a way that clearly excluded me. Roger looked at the scene, at me standing uninvited in the doorway at the laden table, and his expression changed. He was always perceptive. Sorry to interrupt, but it's an urgent matter regarding Mrs. Williams's will. The silence that followed was heavy. Will, the word hung in the air like a storm cloud. Finally, James stood. Come in, Mr. Thompson. We can talk in the living room. Interesting how the mention of a will opened doors my own flesh and blood. Couldn't Patricia reluctantly stepped aside, allowing Roger and me to enter? As we passed through the dining room, Roger stopped and took in the scene before him. James, Patricia, her parents, and my grandchildren surrounded by a lavish meal, while I remained standing uninvited. He cleared his throat, his eyes fixed on Patricia, who had just ordered me to be left hungry. Actually, she owns everything you're enjoying, Roger said, his voice calm but firm. The forks fell silent. 5 pairs of adult eyes stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to horror. This house, this dinner, probably even the utensils you're eating with Thal. Of this exists thanks to Mrs. Williams's generosity. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, Patricia was pulling out a chair for me. Eleanor, how silly of me. Of course we have enough food, I was just joking. You know how playful I am. Her laugh was high-pitched, almost hysterical. James seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He knew all the money I had invested in them over the years. He knew the life savings I had generously shared. Down payment, money, car money, vacation money, the emergencies that never seemed to end. Mom, please sit with us, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I looked at Roger, who gave me a small nod. With a dignity I hadn't known I still possessed, I sat down at the table. Patricia immediately began serving me, piling food onto my plate as if trying to make up for years of neglect with a single meal. We have so much to talk about. It's been so long since we've gathered like this as a family, she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Her parents looked uncomfortable, exchanging nervous glances. Roger remained standing, clutching his leather briefcase. Actually, I came to discuss some changes. Mrs. Williams is considering making to her will, he said, and silence fell over the table again. Changes, James repeated, his voice barely audible. I hadn't discussed any changes with Roger. In fact, I'd barely given my will a second thought since updating it after Harold's death. But in that moment, I realized Roger was giving me something precious: power. For the first time in years, I had my family's undivided attention. Yes, significant changes, I replied, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. But that can wait. Now I'd like to enjoy this family lunch. And I began to eat slowly, savoring not only the food but also the sudden shift in the dynamic around me. That was how my journey of rediscovery began. The day I stopped being just the old woman they tolerated when they needed money and began becoming Eleanor Williams again. A woman with a voice, with power, with dignity. Little did I know that this was just the beginning. That the following months would be a roller coaster of revelations, betrayals, and finally liberation. After lunch, I was invited to stay for coffee. Miraculously, Patricia found a cake she hadn't mentioned before. As the children finally got to open the gifts I'd brought, I noticed how everyone's attitude had changed. Roger excused himself, saying he'd contact me later in the week to discuss the deals. Before leaving, he gave me a discreet wink. As the door closed behind him, Patricia's forced charm intensified. Eleanor, we were just talking about how much we miss you. In fact, we were thinking about inviting you to spend a few weeks with us. The guest room is fully available. The same guest room that had been under renovation the last 5 times. I'd asked if I could visit. That would be lovely, I replied, deciding to play along for now. Actually, I've been thinking a lot about the future lately. James came over, sitting next to me on the couch, something he hadn't done in years. "What kind of thoughts, Mom?" His voice tried to sound casual, but the nervousness was palpable. "About what I'll leave behind. About who valued my presence in life, not just my resources." I saw his face pale. He knew I knew. Everyone knew. That night when I returned to my empty house, something had shifted inside me. The humiliation still burned, but now it was mixed with something new: determination. I sat in the armchair Harold and I had bought together 40 years ago and reflected on how I had gotten to this point. After Harold's death, the loneliness was overwhelming. James and Patricia seemed genuinely concerned at first. Frequent visits, daily phone calls, invitations to dinner. It was when Patricia suggested I help them with the down payment on their new house that everything began to change. "It's an investment in the children's future," she said. "A place where we can all come together as a family." Then came the loans for the car, for the kitchen renovation, for the Disney vacation the boys really deserved. Each request came with promises of repayment that never materialized. Each donation from me received with less gratitude than the last. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the visits became more rare, the phone calls shorter, the invitations non-existent. I had become an ATM with legs. Give the money and disappear. The realization hit me like a train. I had allowed this. In my desperate need to keep my son and grandchildren close, I had financed my own erasure. The next morning I called Roger. "I really want to make changes to my will," I told him. "And I also want to understand exactly how much money I've given James and Patricia over the past few years." Roger didn't seem surprised. "I've already started compiling those numbers, Eleanor. And I suggest we also review the house documents. As I recall, your name is on the deed as Cooner, even though you provided the down payment." It was true. At the time, James had insisted that putting my name on the deed would make things easier if something happened to him. Now I wondered if that had been the only reason. "How long do you think it will take?" I asked. "A few days to gather everything? But, Eleanor, if I may ask, what do you intend to do with this information?" The question hung between us for a moment. What did I intend to do? I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt my son or alienate my grandchildren. But I also couldn't continue to be treated like an inconvenient burden, valued only for my money. "I want my dignity back, Roger, and I want my family to respect me not for what I can give them, but for who I am." 3 days later, got a call from Patricia. Her voice was as sweet as honey. "Eleanor, we're planning a barbecue this weekend, and we'd really like you to come. The kids miss you." Of course they did. Now that Grandma's money was potentially on the line, I was suddenly reminded. "Sounds wonderful," I replied, deciding to continue the charade. "Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself," she replied cheerfully, though I could practically hear the calculations going on in her head. "How much is the old lady's presence worth? How much can we get out of her this time?" "Oh, and Eleanor," she added, as if just remembering, "James and I are thinking about making some improvements to the house. Nothing major, just a new porch and maybe a small remodel in the master bathroom. Could we talk about that when you come?" So predictable, not even a week after finding out. I might be reconsidering my will, and already there was another request for money on the table. "Of course, dear. Always happy to discuss the family's future." I hung up feeling a mixture of sadness and determination. The barbecue would be the beginning of my new approach. On Saturday, I arrived at the barbecue with a gift for each of my grandchildren and a homemade apple pie that had been James's favorite as a child. Patricia greeted me at the door like a celebrity, hugging me warmly. "Eleanor, how wonderful to see you." James appeared right behind her, smiling broadly. "Mom, I'm so glad you came." Tommy and Emma ran to hug me, and for the first time in a long time, Patricia didn't stop them. I was led to the backyard where the new barbecue was in full swing. Patricia's parents were there too, though they seemed less enthusiastic about my presence than last time. Robert could barely look me in the eye. While James prepared the burgers, Patricia sat beside me, her face a mask of concern. "Eleanor, I've noticed you seem a little lonely in that big house. James and I have been talking, and we thought it might be best for you to move closer to us, or even live with us." The suggestion took me by surprise. Not because of its content. I'd expected some kind of maneuver like that, but because of the suddenness of its arrival. Move in with you, I repeated, pretending to consider the idea. Well, that would certainly be a great change. Patricia nodded enthusiastically. We could convert the office into a lovely bedroom for you. Nothing too big but cozy. And you'd always be close to the kids. Translation, we could put her in a tiny space, have full access to her finances, and insure her money. Stays in the family. What about my house? I asked innocently. James approached, trowel in hand. We could sell it, Mom. The real estate market is good right now, and you could use the money too. Invest in your future. Our future, he meant. And of course, Patricia added, you wouldn't have to worry about bills or groceries. We'd take care of everything for you. I bet they would. It's an interesting proposal, I replied calmly. I'll think about it. Speaking of investments, did Patricia mention anything about a bathroom renovation, James and Patricia? Exchanged a quick glance. Yes, James replied, flipping a burger. Nothing fancy. The plumbing's been giving us problems, and we thought we'd take the opportunity to update a few things. Patricia quickly intervened. The contractor gave us a quote of $30,000. We tried to save for it, but with the kids and everything. She trailed off her gaze, pleading. $30,000. Probably twice what it would actually cost. And it was just the beginning. If I moved here, there would always be one more project, one more need, until everything I'd accumulated during my working life was absorbed by their greed. I understand, I said, keeping my expression neutral. As you know, I also have some important financial decisions to make. Roger and I have been working on them. I saw the momentary panic in their eyes quickly masked. Nothing for you to worry about, I added with a smile. After all, we're family. The rest of the barbecue passed in a strange dance of false cordiality. Patricia insisted I sit in the best seat, served me the best parts of the food, and continually steered the conversation toward happy memories and future plans. James showed a sudden interest in my health, my hobbies, my social life. Where was that interest when I spent my birthday alone 3 months ago? Or when I was hospitalized with pneumonia last winter and no one visited? Patricia's parents watched this performance with expressions ranging from discomfort to calculation. They knew the game being played because they had probably advised their daughter on how to play it. Only my grandchildren seemed genuinely happy with my presence, especially when they opened the gifts I brought. Tommy was especially delighted with the toy car set, and Emma wouldn't let go of her new doll. Grandma, why don't you come here anymore? Tommy asked innocently as we played together. The questions silenced the surrounding conversations. Well, honey, Grandma doesn't always get invited, I replied honestly, but without accusation. But that's going to change, Patricia quickly interjected. Grandma will always be welcome here from now on. In fact, we're hoping she'll come live with us. Tommy seemed genuinely excited about the idea. Really, you're going to live here, Grandma? I looked at his hopeful little face, feeling a pang in my heart. For him, I would consider it. But I knew that what Patricia and James really wanted wasn't my presence, but my resources. As the afternoon drew to a close, I politely declined James's offer to drive me home. Thanks, but Roger is coming to pick me up. We have some business to discuss. The mention of the lawyer caused another wave of tension. Business, Patricia asked, trying to sound casual. Nothing serious, I hope? I smiled easily. Just planning for the future, dear. At our age, we need to think about these things. We parted with forced hugs and promises of more meetings soon. When Roger's car pulled up, I saw the relief in James and Patricia's eyes. The old woman was leaving, but at least they had planted the seed. Sell your house. Give us $3,000, move into our glorified broom closet. In the car, Roger looked at me curiously. How did it go exactly as expected? I replied. They want me to sell my house and move in. Oh, and they also want $30,000 for a bathroom remodel. Roger shook his head. I brought the documents you requested. It's worse than we thought, Eleanor. Over the past 8 years since Harold's death, you've given them approximately $157,000 in loans never repaid. That's not counting the $100,000 down payment on the house. The number made me dizzy. I knew it was a lot, but seeing the total amount was shocking. Over $250,000. A large portion of my life savings. What about the deed to the house? Your name is there as a Cooner entitled to 50% of the value. But there's something you should know. I discovered that James applied for a second mortgage 6 months ago using the house as collateral. My blood ran cold. Can he do that without my consent? Technically, no. Your name and signature are on the documents, but Roger hesitated. I have reason to believe the signature may have been forged. The revelation was like a punch in the gut. Forgery, my own son? Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Not without an official forensic analysis, but I compared it with your previous signatures, and there are notable discrepancies. Also, do you remember signing any documents related to a second mortgage? I tried to remember. In recent years, James had occasionally brought me documents to sign, usually related to insurance or banking matters. He could have tricked me into signing something I didn't fully understand, I admitted. But deliberately forging my signature, I don't want to believe my son would do that. Roger sighed. Eleanor, I understand how difficult this is. But we need to consider the possibility. And if it's true, this is fraud. A serious crime. I stared out the window watching the suburban homes pass by. Houses full of families. Families who presumably loved and respected each other. How much did he take out on the second mortgage? $8,000 to $5,000. I nearly choked. That much for what I'm still investigating, but from what I can gather, they bought a boat and took a luxury trip to Europe last summer. A trip I knew nothing about. A boat I'd never seen. While I saved on medicine and heating to borrow money for family emergencies. What do you want to do, Eleanor? Roger asked gently. The question hung between us as I contemplated my options. Confront James, directly involve the police, simply cut off contact, and rewrite my will. Neither option seemed right. None would bring back the lost years or heal the betrayal. I don't know, Roger. I need time to think. Over the next few days, I received 2 more calls from Patricia, each sweeter than the last. She wanted to know if I'd thought about moving, if I'd like to see the room they were preparing for me, if I'd like to meet the contractor to discuss the bathroom renovation. I kept my answers vague, saying I was still considering my options. On Thursday, Roger called with more news. I found out where some of this second mortgage money went, Eleanor. James and Patricia opened a joint account in the Cayman Islands about 5 months ago. My heart sank even further. An offshore account, this went beyond simple family greed or financial mismanagement. This was premeditated, calculated. Why would they do this? Offshore accounts are usually used to hide money from creditors or tax authorities. Or in this case, perhaps from you. The reality of the situation finally hit me full force. It wasn't just about money now. It was about betrayal on a level I'd never imagined. My own son, my only child, had not only used me financially for years, but was now actively hiding money, likely preparing for the day when I was no longer around or had no resources left to exploit. Over the weekend, I decided to pay a surprise visit to an old friend. Martin Fisher had been Harold's coworker for decades and remained close to our family after retirement. At 75, he was one of the few people who truly knew me, who remembered what I was like before I became just James's mom or grandma with the checkbook. Martin was genuinely happy to see me, serving coffee on the sunny porch of his modest home. You look worried, Ellie, he said, using the nickname few still remembered. What's going on? I told him everything. Sunday lunch, Roger's providential intervention, the subsequent discoveries about the OSC money, the second mortgage, the offshore account. When I finished, Martin was silent for a long moment. You know, he finally said, Harold always worried about this. He thought James had inherited his mother's charm, but not her integrity. The mention of my late husband brought tears to my eyes. Harold had been the love of my life, my safe haven. Since his death, I had felt adrift, clinging to James and his family as my last connection to the life I knew. What would Harold have done? I asked, more to myself than to Martin. He smiled sadly. You know the answer to that, Ellie. Harold always said honesty may hurt for a moment, but deceit hurts forever. He would have faced the situation hidden with dignity and truth. Martin was right. Harold never shied away from difficult conversations, never allowed lies or half-truths to go unchallenged. It was one of the many reasons I loved him so much. I'm afraid of losing my son Martin, of losing my grandchildren. Martin covered my wrinkled hand with his. You've already lost them, Ellie. The question now is, will you keep losing yourself too? His words struck me like a lightning bolt. He was right. In my desperate attempt to keep my family close, I had become a shadow of my former self. A source of resources, not a person to be respected and loved. On the drive home, I made my decision. I called Roger from the car. I want to move forward, I told him. I want the truth, no matter how painful. Are you sure, Eleanor, once we start this process, it will be hard to go back? I'm sure, Roger, I've lost too much living in denial. It's time to reclaim my dignity. On Monday morning, Roger began the formal process of investigating the potentially forged signature. I also instructed him to prepare a thorough review of my will and formally document all loans made to James and Patricia. At the same time, I decided not to confront James yet. First, I wanted to fully understand the full extent of the situation. On Wednesday, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia appeared at my door alone with a basket of homemade muffins and a radiant smile. Eleanor, I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. We've missed you. I invited her in, curious about what the angle would be this time. We sat in the living room where photos of Harold James and our family through the years adorned the walls. What a lovely place you have here, Patricia commented, looking around as if she'd never been there before, though she'd visited countless times in the early years. So full of memories. It must be hard to think about leaving. Ah, so that was it. The campaign to get me to sell continued. Yes, there are many memories here, I agreed. This house was the center of our family for almost 4 decades. Patricia nodded understandingly. But sometimes we cling too tightly to the past, don't we? Memories can come with us even when we move away. She picked up a photo of James as a child. James is so worried about you living here alone. We both are. And the costs of maintaining a house like this. It must be a burden to you. I smiled politely. Actually, my financial situation is quite stable. Or at least it was until recently. Patricia blinked, confused by the change in conversation. What do you mean? Well, she said calmly, I discovered some unexpected expenses. A second mortgage on the house I helped you and James buy, for example. Patricia's face paled visibly. Oh, James mentioned something about refinancing for a better rate. Financial details aren't really my area. Her laugh sounded fake, even to herself. Refinancing for a better rate doesn't usually involve withdrawing $85,000 in equity, Patricia, or opening bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. The shock on her face was genuine. She hadn't expected me to know so much. For a moment I thought she might deny everything, but then her expression changed. The mask slipped and I saw the real Patricia for the first time, calculating, cold, determined. You should be happy to help us, she said, her voice losing all artificial sweetness. What are you going to do with all that money anyway, your old Eleanor? You don't have much time left. We're your family. Who else would you leave it to? The naked cruelty of her words shocked me despite everything I'd already learned. Family doesn't treat family like an ATM, Patricia. Family doesn't forge signatures or hide money offshore. Patricia narrowed her eyes. So that's what this is about. You're going to threaten us with legal action now? Your own family? She stood completely abandoning the pretense of a friendly visit. Think carefully about what you're doing, Eleanor. If you sue us, you'll never see your grandchildren again. James will choose my side. He always does. Do you really want to spend your final years completely alone? It was a direct threat, and despite the fear, I also felt a strange sense of liberation. At least now we were being honest. I didn't come here to negotiate, Patricia continued, picking up her purse. I came to offer a solution that would benefit everyone. You would sell this house, move into a small room in our house, and spend your final years surrounded by your family. In exchange, we would ensure you were taken care of. Seems fair to me. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned. But if you prefer lawyers and courts, remember you're just a confused old woman in the eyes of the law. Who will believe you against us? With that, she left, leaving behind the scent of her expensive perfume and the basket of muffins she probably hadn't even made. My hands were shaking when I called Roger right after Patricia left. She practically admitted everything I told him, and then she threatened me. Said I'd never see my grandchildren again if I went through with it. Roger sighed heavily on the other end of the line. That's not uncommon in cases like this, unfortunately. They'll use any emotional leverage available. The question is, does this change your decision? I thought of Tommy and Emma's faces, of the possibility of losing them forever. The pain was almost unbearable. But then I remembered Martin's words. I had already lost them. And Harold's wisdom: honesty may hurt for a moment, but deceit hurts forever. No, it doesn't change my decision. In fact, it only strengthens it. Patricia showed her true colors today. There's no turning back. I see. In that case, I have more information for you. Preliminary signature analysis confirms our suspicions. It's not your signature on the second mortgage documents. Furthermore, I discovered they're 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank is considering initiating foreclosure proceedings. The news was even worse than I expected. Not only had they forged my name, but they were risking losing the house entirely. The house where my grandchildren grew up. The house I had helped make possible. What happens if the bank forecloses? As a Cooner, you would be equally affected. Your share of the property would be at risk. Another layer of betrayal. They weren't just stealing from me, they were willing to leave me homeless in the process. What are my options, Roger? We can report the fraud to the authorities. James would face criminal charges. Or we can try a civil approach, suing them for the money you lent. Or he hesitated. Or you can cut your losses. Okay? Rewrite your will, leaving them out of it, and move on with your life. Accept the money as lost and avoid the trauma of a lawsuit against your own son. It was tempting. Simply walk away. Protect what was left. Avoid the scandal and the pain. But something inside me rebelled against this idea. It wasn't just about the money now. It was about justice. It was about truth. It was about showing Tommy and Emma that there are consequences for dishonest actions, even when committed by their parents. I need to think, Roger, but I want you to keep gathering evidence. And I want a hearing with the bank about the second mortgage. They need to know my signature was forged. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the house where Harold and I had raised James, where we had shared so many joys and sorrows. How had our son become this calculating stranger? Where had we gone wrong? The next morning, I found an old photo in a desk drawer. James at 10, smiling broadly with his first baseball trophy. Harold and I beside him, proud, loving. I cried as I looked at this boy I loved so deeply, who was now willing to manipulate me, steal from me, threaten to alienate me from my grandchildren. The doorbell rang, interrupting my musings. For a moment I feared it was Patricia again, or worse, James. But when I opened the door, I found Tommy standing there alone astride his bike. Tommy, what are you doing here alone? Do your parents know you're here? He shook his head, looking nervous. School ended early, and I biked here. It's not that far. It was at least 2 miles, and he was only 7. Grandma, why did Mommy say you want to hurt us? The innocent question broke my heart. She said you're trying to take our house away, and that we might have to move to a bad place because of you. Damn you, Patricia. Using a child as a pawn in this dirty game was low even for her. I took Tommy inside and poured a glass of lemonade and cookies. Tommy, sometimes adults have complicated disagreements about things like money and property. Your mom and dad made some choices that hurt me, and now we're trying to work it out. I tried to simplify without lying. But I want you to know that I would never, ever do anything to hurt you or your sister. You're the most important people in the world to me. Tommy looked at me with those trusting, childlike eyes. So we won't lose our house, I sighed. How do you explain fraudulent mortgages and bank foreclosures to a 7-year-old? I'm doing everything I can to make sure you're safe and happy, Tommy. That's what grandparents do. He seemed to accept that, at least for now. Now we need to call your parents. They must be worried. Tommy looked alarmed. Mom's going to be mad at me for coming here. She said you're too busy with the lawyer to see us. Another lie. More manipulation. I picked up the phone anyway. Don't worry. I'll explain that you just wanted to visit me. I called James's cell phone, and he answered on the second ring, his voice strained. Mom, what's wrong? Tommy's here with me, James. He rode his bike home after school. I heard his sigh of relief followed immediately by irritation. He shouldn't have done that. We were worried. I know, but he's safe. You can come get him when you can. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mom about Patricia's visit yesterday, so she had told him. Not now, James. Not over the phone and not in front of Tommy. Come get your son. We can talk then. While we waited, Tommy showed me a drawing he'd made at school. Family, mom, dad, sister himself, and me all holding hands under a smiling sun. The family we should have been, not the family we'd become. When the doorbell rang again, James was there looking tense and uncomfortable. Tommy, please wait in the car. I need to talk to Grandma. Tommy gave me a tight hug before leaving, whispering, I love you, Grandma. Those 3 simple words gave me strength for what was to come. When we were alone, James wasted no time. What's this about investigating the second mortgage? Patricia said. You accused her of fraud. I maintained my composure. It's not an accusation, James. It's a fact. My signature was forged. Mom, you signed those papers. Maybe you didn't read them right, or maybe you don't remember. His audacity to suggest I was senile or confused infuriated me. Don't insult my intelligence, James. I never signed any documents for an $85,000 second mortgage. I never authorized the purchase of a boat or a trip to Europe with that money. And I certainly never approved the opening of an account in the Cayman Islands. I saw the shock in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to know so much. Could you? How did I find out? Does it matter? What matters is that my own son, whom I raised, loved, and supported his entire life, committed fraud against me. He stole from me. He lied to me. And now he's about to lose his house because he's not paying the mortgage. James paled. Mom, it's not that simple. We've had some financial setbacks, but we're working on them. Financial setbacks. Is that what you call spending $85,000 on luxuries while letting your bills go unpaid? And the offshore account was that. A setback, too. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me so much of Harold it almost hurt. Patricia thought it would be prudent to have some money saved for emergencies. Emergencies. Like me finding out what you did, I retorted. James didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the floor. I'm disappointed, James, not just for the money, but for the person you've become. Your father would be devastated. The mention of Harold finally provoked a reaction. Don't bring father into this. He always wanted the best for us, always wanted us to have a good life built on lies and theft. That's not what Harold wanted, and you know it. We were at an impasse to strangers who shared blood, but seemingly nothing more. What are you going to do? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you going to report me to the police, sue me, destroy our family? The irony of his words didn't escape me. I didn't destroy our family, James. You and Patricia did that choice after choice, lie after lie. As for what I'll do now, still deciding. The tension between us was palpable. This man before me, with whom I'd spent sleepless nights when I was sick, whom I'd read stories, to whom I'd taught to ride a bike, now looked at me with a mixture of fear and resentment. How had we gotten to this point? Tommy and Emma aren't to blame for this, he finally said. Would you really deprive them of their grandmother, or worse, make them the children of a criminal? It was a low blow, using the children as a shield, but no less than I'd expected at this point. I'm not the one using the children as pawns, James. Patricia. It's already filling Tommy's head with lies about me wanting to hurt you or take your home. If anyone is hurting the children in this situation, it's you too. He had no answer for that. Give me some time to think, I said. I'll talk to Roger about our options. But know this, I'm not going to simply pretend nothing happened. Not this time. James nodded stiffly, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Mom, I'm so sorry. Not for what we did necessarily, but for getting to this point. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get, and we both knew it. I'm sorry too, James, more than you can imagine. After James left, sat in Harold's chair, physically and emotionally exhausted. The confrontation had brought no resolution, no full confession, no clear path forward. But it had brought one thing: the truth was finally on the table. No more innuendo or suspicion, but raw, ugly facts. My son had stolen from me, had misrepresented. Me had hidden money and was now threatening to use my own grandchildren against me if I sought justice. The question remained what to do next. I called Roger again. "I want to know more about my options regarding the house," I told him. "The bank forecloses. What happens to my share of the property? You would lose your initial investment unless we take action now. What kind of action we could try to take over the mortgage, removing James and Patricia as owners due to the fraud. Or we could force a sale before foreclosure to at least recoup some of your investment." Both options seemed drastic, but they were becoming increasingly necessary. What about the fraudulent second mortgage? Can we somehow nullify it? Yes, if we can prove his signature was forged. But that would likely involve criminal charges against James. Once again, I faced the unthinkable reporting my own son to the police. "Give me a few days, Roger. I need to consider all the implications." The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions and sleepless nights. I received a text from Patricia, pretending our last meeting had never happened. "Hi, Eleanor. Just checking in on you. The boys miss you." Dinner next weekend. Her audacity was almost admirable. On Friday, Roger called with disturbing news. "Eleanor, I discovered that James and Patricia have listed the house for sale." I was momentarily speechless. "Can they do that without my consent?" "Not legally, no. But they already forged your signature once." It wouldn't be surprising if they did it again for the sales documents. The situation was escalating faster than I had anticipated. They were trying to sell the house out from under me, probably planning to take the money and disappear before I found out. What do? We need to act now, Eleanor. I'll file a legal notice against the sale of the property. And we need to decide on the criminal charges. We don't have the luxury of time anymore. He was right. The moment for contemplation was over. It was time for action. Do whatever it takes to stop the sale, Roger. And prepare the documents to report the fraud. My voice cracked on the last sentence, but my resolve didn't. Are you sure? Right. Once this starts, I'm sure. They left me with no choice. The next morning, received an angry call from James. "What the hell do you think you're doing? We just received a legal notice from your lawyer." "I'm protecting my interests, James. Just like you and Patricia have been protecting yours. You're preventing us from selling our own house." "My house too, James? Or have you forgotten that I'm a cooner? That I put up the down payment, that I have as much right to it as you do? This is ridiculous. You're acting like a vengeful old woman." His words hit me like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. "No, James. I'm acting like a woman who's finally tired of being used and discarded. A woman who deserves respect and honesty. A woman who will no longer allow her own son to steal from her." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When James spoke again, his voice had changed. No longer furious, but cold and calculating. "You'll regret this, Mom. We were going to take care of you. Now you'll be completely alone." It was a clear threat. "I'm already alone, James. I've been alone ever since you and Patricia decided. I was worth more as a bank than as a mother and grandmother." He hung up without another word. Less than an hour later, Patricia sent me a message that chilled my blood. "We just enrolled the kids in a private school across the country. We're moving at the end of the month. I hope you're happy with your victory. They were planning to flee with my grandchildren." I called Roger immediately. "They're threatening to take the kids away," I said, almost panicked. "Can they do that legally?" "Yes. They're the parents. Unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect, they have the right to move with their children." I felt cornered. If I went ahead with the charges, I would lose my grandchildren. If I backed down, James and Patricia would have won, continuing their pattern of manipulation and abuse. "There's one more thing we can try," Roger said hesitantly. "What? Public confrontation. Sometimes people like James and Patricia back down when they realize their actions won't stay secret. If they know we're prepared to go public with everything, the fraud, the offshore account, everything, they might prefer a settlement." It was risky. It might only anger them more. But I was running out of options. Try. But Roger, I don't want to hurt the children any more than they've already been hurt. I understand, Eleanor. I'll be careful. Roger sent a formal letter detailing all the evidence we had, gathered and proposing a meeting to discuss a possible settlement. The response came not from James or Patricia, but from a lawyer they had hired. My clients vehemently deny all allegations and consider your threats a form of extortion. They are prepared to countersue for defamation if you pursue these baseless allegations. So they were playing hardball, refusing to admit any wrongdoing, hiring legal representation, and turning the accusations against me. Typical. I shared the letter with Roger, who didn't seem surprised. It's a standard tactic, Eleanor. They're bluffing. We have concrete evidence. They only have denials. Don't let that intimidate you. But I was intimidated. Not by their lawyer or the threats of countersuing, but by how quickly my family had disintegrated. By how easily decades of love and sacrifice had been discarded in favor of greed and selfishness. What's next? I asked, feeling exhausted from the constant battle. We've moved on. We've filed a formal complaint about the forged signature. We've started the process to protect your share of the house. And we've prepared your new will removing James as a beneficiary. It was the end of an era. The end of the pretense that we were a loving family. The beginning of something new and uncertain. Amidst all this chaos, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Tommy, obviously written with someone's help, probably a teacher. Dear Grandma, I'm sad because Mom says we're moving far away and I might not be able to see you anymore. Why are you fighting? I love you and miss you. Please don't be mad at us. From your grandson Tommy, attached was a drawing, me on one side, his parents on the other, and Tommy and Emma in the middle, big blue tears streaming from their eyes. I cried at the sight, feeling the full weight of what was happening. The children were being dragged into a battle that wasn't theirs, suffering for choices they didn't make. It was unfair. It was cruel. And I couldn't let it continue. I called Roger. I need another option, I told him. Something that protects my financial interests but doesn't separate the children from me. Roger was silent for a moment. There's a possibility. A structured settlement that would involve James and Patricia acknowledging the debt and agreeing to a payment plan. In exchange, you wouldn't press criminal charges. We'd include guarantees for regular visitation with the children. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't complete justice. But perhaps it was the best possible compromise in an impossible situation. Try it, I told him. But make it clear that this is your last chance. If they refuse, we'll move forward. Roger prepared the terms of the agreement. James and Patricia would acknowledge the total debt of $242,000. The previous loans plus my share of the house. They would pay a modest but significant monthly payment for the next 15 years. I would have guaranteed visitation rights with Tommy and Emma at least 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks each summer. In exchange, I would not press criminal charges regarding the fraud and would withdraw my objection to the sale of the house, provided I received my fair share of the proceeds. The terms were generous considering what they had done. They established accountability without destroying their lives or harming the children. Their response arrived 3 days later through their lawyer. My clients categorically reject your offer and consider your terms to be coercive and unfair. They were calling my bluff. They believed I wouldn't pursue criminal charges, that my love for the children would prevent me from seeking full justice. Perhaps they were right. The thought of James potentially facing prison was almost unbearable. The thought of Tommy and Emma growing up with a father convicted of fraud was equally painful. But the thought of James and Patricia getting away with it, taking my grandchildren away, and continuing their pattern of manipulation and abuse was, perhaps, the most painful of all. I was in the midst of this agonizing decision when I received an unexpected call. It was Martha, Patricia's mother. Eleanor, we need to talk. Not as adversaries, but as grandparents concerned for Tommy and Emma's well-being. I was surprised. Martha had never shown much interest in forming a connection with me. At best, we were polite acquaintances who shared grandchildren. I'm listening, I replied cautiously. I know what James and Patricia did, she said, her voice strained. Robert and I just found out about the fraud, the second mortgage, everything. We're devastated isn't a strong enough word. This was the last thing I expected allies on their side. How did you find out, Tommy? That boy hears more than anyone realizes. He said something about you losing your house because of false paperwork, and we started asking questions. Patricia finally admitted everything when we pressed her. I felt a surge of gratitude for my observant grandson and his innocent honesty. What do you want, Martha? We want to help solve this. What James and Patricia did is unforgivable. But sending James to prison won't help anyone, especially the children. We want to propose an alternative solution. Martha explained that she and Robert were willing to step in financially. They would use part of their own retirement to immediately pay half of what I was owed. The remainder would be paid over time by James and Patricia under Martha and Robert's strict supervision. In exchange, I wouldn't press criminal charges, and they would personally ensure I had regular access to my grandchildren. Why would they do that? I asked, still skeptical. Because it's the right thing to do, Martha replied simply, and because we love those children as much as you do. They deserve to have all their grandmothers in their lives. And they deserve parents who take responsibility for their actions, not parents behind bars. It was a surprising and unexpected offer. A lifeline in troubled waters. I need to discuss this with my lawyer, I told her. But thank you, Martha. Really, don't thank me yet. We have a long way to go to fix what James and Patricia broke. But at least we can start. Roger was cautiously optimistic about Martha's proposal. It's unusual, but it could work. We'd set everything up legally, of course. Signed agreements, guarantees, detailed payment schedules. What if they don't? Comply. We'll include strict default clauses. And with Patricia's parents involved as financial and moral guarantors, there's an additional layer of security. It wasn't the complete justice part of me craved. James and Patricia wouldn't face legal consequences for their actions, but they would face the shame of having their parents intervene, the humiliation of admitting their guilt, the indignity of being financially supervised as irresponsible teenagers. And most importantly, Tommy and Emma wouldn't lose their father too. Prison, and I wouldn't lose my grandchildren to distance and resentment. Let's move forward, I decided. Prepare the necessary documents. The meeting was scheduled for Martha and Robert's home the following Sunday. Neutral, familiar territory for everyone. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense, charged with unspoken emotions and unmade accusations. James couldn't look me in the eye. Patricia looked recently cried, her eyes red and puffy. Martha and Robert were solemn like judges presiding over an informal family tribunal. Roger stood beside me, a calming presence amidst the discomfort. The documents were laid out on the dining room table, the financial agreement, the payment. Schedule the visitation terms, the confessions of debt and fraud. James and Patricia hesitated when it came time to sign. This is humiliating, Patricia murmured. It's far less than you deserve, Martha replied coolly, surprising everyone with her frankness. Sign the papers and start rebuilding some dignity. With trembling hands, they signed. I signed, Roger, Martha, and Robert signed as witnesses. It was official. It wasn't a fairy tale happy ending, but it was a start. A beginning based on truth and responsibility, not lies and manipulation. When the documents were duly signed, Martha stood. Tommy and Emma are out there playing. They know nothing about this, and that's how it should stay. As for us adults, we have a lot of work to do to rebuild the trust that was broken. She looked directly at her daughter. Patricia, you and James will spend a lot of time reflecting on your choices and working to repair them. Eleanor, she turned to me. You've shown admirable strength and grace through all of this. I hope one day we can truly be a united family. It was a noble sentiment, though I doubted the open wounds of these past months would ever completely heal. But for Tommy and Emma's sake, I was willing to try. I hope so too. Martha James finally spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. Mom, I don't have the words to express, ... I held up my hand, cutting him off. Not now, James. Words are cheap. Actions are what matter now. Show me over time that you understand what you did and that you are truly sorry. That means more than any speech right now. That afternoon, when I left Martha and Marbert's house, something had shifted inside me. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was walking on solid ground, not quicksand. The following months were a slow rebuilding process. James and Patricia followed through on their agreement, making the monthly payments as promised. Our meetings were initially uncomfortable, marked by tension and carefully chosen words. But for Tommy and Emma, we all pretended everything was fine. It was one Sunday afternoon, almost 6 months after our agreement, that something unexpected happened. I was at their house for the monthly lunch that had become our routine. While helping Patricia in the kitchen, a task that would have previously been unthinkable, she suddenly began to cry. Not the calculated tears I'd seen before, but genuine sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. "I never wanted to be this kind of person," she confessed through tears. "When I met James, we were so in love, so full of dreams. Then came the bills, the kids, the pressure to keep up appearances. We started with small loans, thinking we'd pay them back. Then it became larger amounts, and the line grew until it got out of control." She wasn't prepared for that moment of vulnerability, for that confession, without any incentive other than her own conscience. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm tired of living with this burden. Because Tommy asked me the other day why Grandma always looks sad when she comes to visit. Because I want my children to grow up seeing examples of honesty and responsibility, not manipulation and lies." I don't know if I forgave Patricia that day. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. But something began to heal inside me. A wound I thought was permanent slowly began to close. James took longer. His pride was deeply wounded, not only by the exposure of his actions, but by the need for his in-laws to intervene. Still, over time, I saw glimpses of the boy I had raised. Small moments of genuine connection. A handwritten birthday card that made me cry with its sincerity. A surprise visit on an ordinary weekday just to check in on me. As for me, I've rediscovered parts of myself I've forgotten. I started attending a painting group, a hobby I'd abandoned after Harold's death. I made new friends, people who valued me for who I was, not for what they could get from me. I rewrote my will this time with terms that rewarded responsibility and care, not just blood ties. And the grandchildren. Oh, Tommy and Emma were my greatest joy. The 2 weeks they spent with me each summer became an annual tradition. I took them camping, to museums, to parks. I told them stories about their grandfather, about their roots, about the importance of integrity and honesty. I planted seeds that I hope will flourish long after I'm gone. Today at 76, I look back and see that humiliating moment at the dinner table. "Don't feed her, let the old woman starve" was actually the beginning of my liberation. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to find the strength to swim to the surface. I won't lie and say our family is completely healed. There are scars that remain, moments of mistrust that arise when we least expect it. But we are building something new on the ruins of what was destroyed. Something imperfect but real. Something based on truth, not illusion. The most valuable lesson I've learned: that true love doesn't mean allowing abuse. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, but self-respect. That we're never too old to get back on our feet, to demand dignity, to start over. If my story touched you in any way, if you saw yourself in my struggles or found inspiration in my journey, please leave a like so others can find this narrative. In the comments, tell me, have you ever faced family betrayal? How did you deal with it? Subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, stories of pain and overcoming of falls and new beginnings. Because we all have battles to fight, and hearing each other's experiences strengthens us for our own battles. Thank you for listening, for giving me a voice, for allowing me to transform my pain into something that might help others find their own strength.